Rome lost the Battle of Cannae not because it was weak, and not because it made a mistake. It lost because it did everything right. On that day, Rome brought nearly 80,000 soldiers onto the battlefield. It was the largest army the Republic had ever assembled. By evening, more than 50,000 of them were dead. The most disciplined army of its time had turned into its own prison, and when Roman soldiers finally realized what was happening, there was nowhere left to run. But to understand how this was possible, we must first understand not Rome, but the man who chose to break Rome's system from the inside. His name was Hannibal. Hannibal entered history as one of the greatest tacticians warfare has ever known. In 218 BC, he did what was considered impossible. He led his army across the Alps, through cold cliffs and mountains that were weapons by themselves. He marched with infantry, cavalry, and war elephants, not for spectacle, but to strike at the very heart of Roman power. This crossing was not madness. It was a declaration. The rules you believe in do not apply to me. Crossing the Alps did not make Hannibal's army stronger physically. It made it different. The men were exhausted, starving, and frozen. Many marched without feeling their legs. Yet it was in this exhaustion that they were hardened. Those who emerged from the mountains already knew the limits of pain. They understood that fear is a state that can be endured. When this army appeared on the plains of Italy, the Romans did not see soldiers. They saw ghosts. Men who had survived where humans were not meant to survive. This was Hannibal's first psychological victory, long before Cannae. Hannibal's hatred of Rome was personal. His father, Hamilcar Barca, had commanded Carthaginian forces during the First Punic War, a war Carthage lost. According to tradition, when Hannibal was 9 years old, his father brought him to an altar and made him swear eternal hatred toward Rome. This oath was not a child's emotion. It became the foundation of Hannibal's thinking. He did not grow into a general alone. He grew into an anti-system, shaped specifically to oppose Rome. That is why at Cannae, Hannibal was not searching for a heroic victory. He was searching for the destruction of Rome's way of war. He did not want to win a battle. He wanted to prove that Rome's system was mortal. Now we must understand Rome. Rome approached Cannae with absolute confidence. Not hope. Not optimism. Confidence. The Republic assembled an army meant to end the war. Heavy infantry, veterans, discipline forged over generations. 2 consuls stood at its head, representing not just command, but the will of Rome itself. Across from them stood Hannibal, but Rome did not fear his mind. Rome trusted numbers. Rome believed mass created inevitability. That pressure always wins. It came not to negotiate, but to crush. This belief became its first mistake. To understand Cannae, one must understand how Rome fought. Rome did not worship genius. It worshipped systems. Roman warfare was not about inspiration. It was about repetition. Formation, order, pressure. The legion was built to function even when individuals failed. Men could be replaced. Structure could not. This system had won again and again against tribes, coalitions, and enemies who broke under pressure. Rome's method was simple. Advance. Hold formation. Apply pressure. Win through endurance. It was not elegant, but it was relentless. And it created the illusion that the system itself was invincible. At Cannae, Rome believed the outcome was already decided. Hannibal had won before through maneuver and deception. Now Rome denied him space. Numbers would do the rest. The plan was straightforward. A deep, dense infantry formation would crush the enemy center, after which resistance would collapse. Rome did not fear Hannibal's intellect. It trusted its own weight. This seemed rational. It had worked before. But Rome failed to understand one thing. Discipline without flexibility becomes a trap. Hannibal asked a different question. What happens if Rome's system works exactly as intended? He knew Rome would advance. He knew Rome would push forward. He knew Roman soldiers would not stop. So he shaped the battlefield to punish those instincts. Hannibal understood an uncomfortable truth. When people feel momentum, they stop thinking. Momentum feels like control. It feels like success. But it narrows perception. The faster you move forward, the less you see. The battle began calmly. The Roman center advanced. Shields locked. The formation moved like a single organism. Hannibal's center retreated slowly and deliberately. To Roman soldiers, it looked like victory. To commanders, confirmation. But as the Romans advanced, the formation tightened. Movement became harder. Density increased. And this felt like strength. At some point, the advance stopped being controlled. There was no order. No signal. The formation moved because it could not stop. Every soldier was pushed from behind. Every step felt inevitable. This is where discipline becomes dangerous. Rome trained soldiers to ignore fear. It also trained them to ignore doubt. And doubt could have saved them. As the formation compressed, soldiers did not immediately understand what was happening. No one shouted that the army was surrounded. Space simply disappeared. Shields pressed into the backs of comrades. The air grew heavy. Direction vanished. Soldiers no longer knew front from rear. They saw only helmets, shoulders, armor. Fear did not arrive suddenly. It accumulated. First discomfort, then anxiety, then suffocation. Roman soldiers were trained not to panic, but they were never trained to be trapped. They were taught to advance or hold ground, not to stand without the ability to move. Men collapsed not from wounds, but from exhaustion. Those who fell rarely stood again. Meanwhile, Roman consuls observed the advancing center and initially interpreted it as success. Everything appeared to unfold according to plan. The problem was that Roman command lacked tools for rapid adaptation. Its system was rigid. When the flanks began losing space, it was already too late. Any attempt at maneuver within such density produced chaos. The consuls became prisoners of the system they trusted. The encirclement was not sudden. It was slow and inevitable. The flanks closed. Space vanished. Commands disappeared. Sound distorted. The formation existed, but understanding did not. The army could not retreat because there was no room. It could not advance deliberately because control was gone. The system became a prison. By day's end, more than 50,000 Roman soldiers lay dead. The scale of loss was so vast that later Romans spoke not of defeat, but of a day when an entire generation vanished. News of Cannae struck Italy like a shockwave. Cities and allies that once considered Rome unbreakable began to hesitate. Some defected to Carthage. Others waited. For the first time in generations, fear spread beyond soldiers to politicians and civilians. In Rome itself, the days after the battle passed in heavy silence. Lists of the dead were too long to read in a single sitting. Nearly every household had lost someone. Public mourning was restricted, not out of cruelty, but from understanding that panic could destroy the Republic faster than Hannibal ever could. Rome did not collapse. It adapted. The Republic abandoned the idea of decisive battle at any cost. It avoided large engagements with Hannibal. Instead, it exhausted him. Supply lines were cut. Allies were targeted. Hannibal was forced to move constantly, unable to consolidate victory. War became slow, cautious, and calculated. Rome learned that discipline without adaptation is lethal. That systems must be able to pause, change direction, and doubt themselves. Cannae was not only a military catastrophe. It was a lesson in thinking. This is why Rome, defeated at Cannae, ultimately won the war. Hannibal achieved a legendary tactical victory but failed to convert it into final success. His army was far from home. Support from Carthage was limited. Time, the resource he gained, gradually turned against him. Cannae remains in history not as a lesson in brutality, but as a warning. Any system that cannot stop will eventually destroy itself. Any force that mistakes momentum for control walks into its own trap. The warrior's mind is not the absence of fear, nor blind courage. It is awareness under pressure. The ability to think when the body demands only forward motion. Rome learned this lesson in blood, on the field of Cannae. This is the warrior's mind,